You're listening to Recovery Survey, the podcast that shatters stigmas around different types of addictions and takes a deep dive into spiritual principles.
I find a lot of wisdom that comes from your show. You interview different people, and I know you just do an overall good job, and you're a blessing to recovery in general. So I want to make that very clear for the record that I love the movement that you have, what you're doing. You're saving lives, and you're educating and informing people. And I think that's important.
I want to thank my friends at Recovery Survey for giving me the opportunity to talk to them about my recovery journey.
Thank you for having me on the new podcast that you just developed, which is unbelievable, Recovery Survey Podcast. I really appreciate what you're doing and been doing and continue doing.
Our guest today is a Canadian hip-hop artist named Chris. He goes by the stage name Ill Tone, and he's here to tell us about his recovery journey. Welcome to the show, Chris.
So I go by the artist name of Ill Tone. My actual name is Chris, but I grew up in a small town called the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. And I noticed from a very early age that I had substance abuse issues stemming from social anxiety and the underlying defects of that nature. I found that when I would drink alcohol and use other substances like marijuana, that I would be looser. I didn't have the same social anxiety issues. Socializing was easier for me. But right away, I noticed that I was the first one to get started on the substances, the last one to finish, the worst feeling one the next morning, and the most willing to start it all over again despite the damage that I had caused myself and others the night before. By my mid-teens, I was a daily user of both marijuana and alcohol. And I remember at about age 15 looking at a friend of mine and saying, we have a problem, we're alcoholics. This was at age 15. So recognizing the powerlessness of my disease is something that came very early. I discovered hip-hop music at an early age, and that was always an outlet for me to express emotions stemming from both my substance abuse and the underlying defects causing those substance abuse issues. And I perceived that as being a very positive outlet. I could express my emotions through song format and be creative, and it also gave me a focus to stay away from the other stuff so I could sit down and write a song and I wasn't out causing havoc when I was doing that. So that was a very positive outlet for me. When I got into my late teens, I had a very serious car wreck and ended up going through treatment as a result of that car wreck. But I had it in my mind at that time that I was going to be able to pick and choose my substances that I would continue using after treatment. So I figured that I go in, I learn how to use socially or cut out one and keep the others, and then carry on life as normal. As I'm sure I don't need to tell you, that's not really how it works. And so when I came out of treatment, I continued using marijuana and alcohol, and thought that I would be able to control my substance abuse issues, despite what I had learned in treatment, which was all to the contrary. And so when I got out, I did stay. I wouldn't say I was clean or sober, but I was certainly a little bit better off having had the break in my using time, because I had a couple months to screw my head back on. Within a couple years, things spiraled out of control again. At this time, I had moved from the small town in which I grew up over to Vancouver, and I had immersed myself in the hip-hop community of Vancouver. So I was doing shows, things of that nature. But as we all know, the entertainment industry is riddled with substance abuse issues as well. I'm not going to blame my problems on the industry or my surroundings. I made my own decisions. But being in bars and nightclubs all the time, very hard to abstain from those problems with chemical dependency, just because it's always around, right? I have a little bit of a saying that if you're at an Italian restaurant for long enough, you're going to eat Italian food. And so I did participate a lot in the drinking culture, which is prevalent in the performance industry. In my mid-20s, I've gotten quite a bit further into the music scene, but I wanted to clean up and take an actual shot at getting somewhere with music. So to turn it from a hobby to a career, so to speak. And so I went back to treatment again, this time with a crack cocaine dependency, which is a beast all on its own. It drains the bank account very quick and leaves one physically, a physical shell of one's former self. And I was certainly looking very gaunt. I was not healthy physically or mentally. So I decided to go back to treatment, this time by my own volition. The first time I could say very clearly it was partly because of the law. I had been in a car accident. I knew that I would get a lesser sentence as a result of having gone to treatment. So I had gone on those grounds the first time around. But this time I made the decision to go in totally independently. I'd also just finished up audio engineering and production school for my music and had done fairly well despite my problems. So I knew that if I cleaned up, I would excel at my craft at emceeing and beat making and engineering. So I went back in by my own volition and really put my best foot forward there. I worked very hard. I divulged all. I didn't hold anything back. This time I was in a non-12-step based treatment facility, and they weren't really pushing the 12 steps too much. They weren't opposed to them. I was very adamantly opposed to spiritual growth at that time. I would even say that I was bigoted towards religion, and that's something that I'm glad I have turned the corner on today, because as we all know, spiritual growth and belief in a higher power is the foundation of the program. And if we are bigoted towards those principles, we won't really be able to grow and build connections in that regard as well. So I've thrown that bigotry by the wayside and have since turned the corner. But at that time, I was very atheist in my belief structure. So I went through, though. I did do my best in treatment, but I came out and there was no aftercare. I did not participate in a fellowship. I didn't grow a support community. There was nothing wholesome about my recovery. I was just white-knuckling it. I went right back into the bars and nightclubs. And once again, that Italian restaurant was looking awfully tasty. I did manage to white-knuckle it for 2.5 years there. But eventually the kicker was I was out on tour in Europe, and after having white-knuckled it for 2.5 years, I eventually just grabbed a beer. And by the end of the tour, I was back to drinking, 15 to 20 a day. I came back to Canada and got back into the harder drugs. And it was elevated a little bit to a crystal meth addiction rather than just crack cocaine and coke and alcohol and marijuana. Now I was hooked on crystal meth, which was, a devil all unto itself. It's a different beast, I think. I mean, everybody has their own struggles. Some people have marijuana as their struggle. Well, that's it for you. And I'm not saying my problems are any worse, but for me, that was the one that sunk me very quickly. I promptly threw all my creative hobbies by the wayside. I isolated quite a bit. I got a different job that was positive for me. I got into the sales industry. But without that, spiritual connection with either creativity or participating in the fellowship or making friends that were, suffering from similar ailments that I was suffering from, being chemical dependency and, self-esteem issues and social anxiety. Without that network of people who understood me, I kind of withered up and proceeded to start dying, spiritually, morally, physically again. To make a long story short, I ended up just last year in April, I got arrested and found myself in Wilkinson Prison down in Victoria, which is the capital city up here in British Columbia. Not that big of a city, about 300,000 people, but that's where I was living beforehand. And got arrested, wound up in prison, and my addict mind was still staying while I was in there. I really lost, I'll backtrack a bit here. I'd really lost connection with my family, all my former friends, the music community, as happens when one is isolated in his or her addiction. But when I went into prison, my parents were willing to pay for a lawyer to help me out. And it was at that point, because I had previously been thinking that I was just going to get out, go into a sober house where I could use. I'd be out on bail, and then I'd go right back to my same lifestyle, and everybody else could go through themselves. But once my parents started really helping me out and paying for my lawyer, and I was conversing with my mom for the first time in years, I really decided to make another change. I was like, well, I can't put my family through this again. They're sticking their neck out for me, my bail. You know, my mom is still in my corner after all these years of, you know, being a terrible son, essentially. And I'm really gonna try this out again. So I actually ended up getting released on bail to the treatment facility that I had gone to when I was 19, which was a 12-step based treatment facility. And it was a little bit different of a situation because I didn't have to be dragged in the door kicking and screaming like the first time around, where I went in super nervous and dreading having to make any sort of change. I was coming out of prison into treatment, and it was, you know, a joyous experience. Treatment's a lot better than prison, I'll tell you that much. So I went back in good spirits and with the right attitude. And the biggest thing that shifted in me was I wasn't going to look at that word God in the 12 steps with disdain anymore. I was going to listen to what I was told. I was going to take the advice of the people around me. Because how can you look into the program like AA or NA where, you know, it's working for people, they're happy, they're smiling, they have friends, they have lives. How can I look in at that scowling when, you know, all I'm looking at myself at in the mirror is a scowling man? That's all I see when I look in the mirror. But how can I look at all these people smiling and think that what they're doing is wrong when, you know, internally I'm feeling void of all spirituality, void of all morality. So how can I judge them, you know, when they're willing to accept me? And how can I judge them and not be willing to accept them when what they're doing is working? So I went in with the right attitude. I really got cracking on the step work in the treatment program. I went into, they take you through steps 1 to 5. And on step 5, we read through with a chaplain who became a very good inspiration to me while I was in treatment. Great guy named Sean. I, you know, got along with all my counselors. Not every day of it was perfect. I have a little bit of a temper. I'm not going to say that my defects, the underlying defects, alleviated themselves immediately, because that's not how it works. It would be nice if it were that way, but I can't snap my finger and make 30 some odd years of defects go away just like that. But I really did work hard. I divulged all of my step work. I went through extended care there. So I was in treatment for 3.5 months. I got a sponsor. I started doing regular meetings, 3 to 5 a week at first. I have now taken on a sponsee. This is fast forwarding a little bit. I do service work. I'm the GSR, the group service representative for the Narcotics Anonymous Nooner here in Nanaimo. I've really immersed myself in the program. And so from the time that I went into prison down in Victoria, which was just over 14 months ago, I feel more spiritually, morally, and totally whole than I did white-knuckling at 2.5 years before in my early 20s after getting out of that non-12-step-based treatment facility. I have friends today. I have, you know, my mother is back in my life. I'm on semi-speaking terms with my father after, you know, 8 years of having not spoken to him. Like I said, friends again. I picked back up my creative hobbies, and I'm starting to learn how to use them or practice them without using the substances as well. And because I have that recovery community as well to be there in a positive, you know, in a positive place in my life to exist in, you know, a place of positivity and help me, you know, encourage me to go through this in a sober manner. It's actually, you know, fun again. It's not just white knuckling it in bars and nightclubs. It's getting back to writing, getting back to, you know, structuring instrumentals, getting back into the production side of things. So it's become fun again rather than just doing it, you know, hell bent on making it further in the industry with really no enjoyment coming from it.
Well, you mentioned something that I'd like to maybe unpack a little bit more. You were talking about your struggle with the higher power concept and coming into the rooms with, I can't remember if you said agnostic or atheist viewpoints, but what was it, or how did you get to that place where you accepted a higher power and got with the higher power concept? Because I know a lot of people that when they first come into 12-step programs, that's one of the biggest things that they struggle with. And I know even for me personally, when I came in and I saw, you know, the steps up there on the wall and saw the word God, I definitely remember kind of like going, ooh, like, I don't know if this is for me. So what was it? How did you get to that place where you were able to come to terms with a higher power and use that in your recovery?
Good question. So when I was in prison down in Victoria, there was the opportunity to get off of my unit once per week and go to a weekly AA meeting that was hosted on another unit. And one of the people who ran that meeting and who oversaw things on that unit was the prison inmate chaplain. And he was a really nice guy. His name was Kevin. And I put in a request to get a big book through him. And I wasn't a stranger to the program. I had been to meetings before after my first time through, with the perception that I would be able to pick and choose my substances. But I really didn't want to do the steps or read the big book or anything. I just wanted to go to stay sober for an hour, be clean for an hour, and then, go right back to my life or whatever. Maybe white knuckle it for a few days at that point. But I decided when I was in prison, because there wasn't much else to do, that I would read the big book. I would read the Living Sober text. I would read whatever literature they had for me. I started reading issues of Grapevine as well, which I love. It's like a meeting, an AA meeting in a little Reader's Digest style magazine, which is pretty cool too. So I put in requests to the chaplain to get these materials and started thinking, this guy is awesome. He's bringing me, books to read. He's there to get us off the unit once a week, if nothing else. He's, overseeing these AA meetings. The guys who are coming from outside the prison to actually facilitate and chair the meetings, they're great too. How can I scoff at this, So I started thinking maybe there's more to this. And so because I was raised atheist, it was a little bit harder for me. But I've always been by the belief that I am an open person, and so I was thinking, well, I've got to be more open about this too. So I thought, my spirituality and my spiritual principles for now, until I, may have a, aha moment where I change my mind or open up to something even greater than this. My spiritual, my perception of spirituality is going to be just that the fellowship itself is my spirituality, because there's all these great people working together to accomplish the common goal of helping one another stay sober. So, that in itself is a power greater than myself. So it doesn't matter what the person on my left thinks about spirituality. They may be a Buddhist or a Christian or Islamic or whatever they may be. They're in this program for the same reason I am. So we're helping one another out. So how is that not a power greater than myself? So to this day, that's kind of how I identify with my higher power, is just that the program itself is, a group of drunks, God, a group of drunks helping other drunks so they can in turn help drunks help drunks. Or, in NA we say group of degenerates or whatever. Whatever anybody else wants to believe, that's their business for sure. I'm never going to scoff at anybody else's concept of religion. Or spirituality for that matter, but that is my concept of spirituality in the context of the 12-step fellowship. And I've also started thinking lately, I don't know, I have some concept of creational force as well, maybe a creator of the universe that I don't really see as being a sentient power, but maybe a non-sentient creator, like, I believe in the Big Bang, but if it was just a swirling mass of heat and chemicals, who put the heat and chemicals there? So I would consider myself more of an agnostic today than an atheist. I was certainly raised atheist. So that's a little bit of background on how I came to believe in a power greater than myself.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Another thing that you kind of alluded to, and it's something I struggled with when I first came in, is it's what I call buffet style. Like, I wanted to pick and choose what I wanted from the program and what I didn't want, and I kind of wanted to make my own program. It didn't work out for me. I ended up relapsing, using again, and I think that was kind of the jarring experience that made me go, I can't make up my own program. Like, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it 100% and make the program the most important thing. Quit trying to pick and choose and do what I want. And I think a lot of that came from realizing my powerlessness and realizing that I wasn't as important or as powerful as I think I was. And I think for me, that was part of coming to that realization of that higher power and actually wanting to practice surrender and put some of these principles into application and actually do the program the way that it's designed to be done.
Absolutely. So first off, I love the term buffet style. I'm going to use that actually when I talk to people. No buffet style recovery. That's awesome. For sure. I've never heard that one before. I had my own, like I said, relapse is part of my path. I did go through treatment 3 times. I've actually been to treatment 5 times, but through completing programs 3 times. So I did the same thing. The first time I got out, and it was, marijuana and alcohol were going to stay in my life, but cocaine was going to be gone. Well, I mean, that didn't take long for me to get back to, first of all, binge drinking. I couldn't socially drink. None of us can. And secondly, getting back into the cocaine, because all my judgment goes out the window when I'm drinking, and I just get back into that stuff too. So that didn't work. And then when I went through in my mid-20s, so that first experience was after I went in when I was 19, in my late teens. In my mid-20s, I went in with the concept, or with the idea, that I was going to get rid of everything. But then, 2.5 years later, just when I was on that tour, when I picked up that one beer, it was like 2 months before I was all of a sudden a crystal meth addict. And that was something that was not prominent in my life prior to my last stint of trying to abstain from substances. So, that didn't work either. Picking up that one beer certainly didn't get me anywhere, but back down to street level addiction. And so this time I've just decided that there won't be anything. There won't be, a puff of a joint here and there. There's not going to be any beer or anything like that. Not even the near beers, the non-alcoholics, because what's the point? I wouldn't do a line of non-cocaine cocaine. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to pick up a non-alcoholic beer, because it's just, something that tastes like beer that's going to trigger me to do something else. So yeah, no buffet style recovery on this end either.
Absolutely, man. We can't be doing that buffet style recovery. If anyone's interested in your hip hop music, where can they find that at?
If anybody does want to look into my music, I do have a new album out. It's called Up in My Head, and you can find it at illtone.bandcamp.com. That's ILL.TONE.bandcamp.com. Also on Spotify, also on Instagram, instagram.com/illtonesmusic, facebook.com/illtonesmusic. You can follow me on those platforms as well, but I do make a lot of recovery-themed songs. So if you are looking for some hip-hop music from Canada that you might be able to relate to, and you're into recovery, then you might find a few gems in the lyrics in those tracks.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing with us about your journey. That was great, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Brett. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you again, Chris, for sharing your journey with us. The links for his social media as well as his Bandcamp will be in the show notes. Be sure to check that out. You've been listening to Recovery Survey. If you got anything out of today's episode, I'd ask you to please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can find us at recoverysurvey.com. You can listen to all of our episodes on the website as well as connect with us on social media, where you can get previews for upcoming episodes.
So you love podcasts, and you want to listen to more amazing content, but you have no idea what to listen to. And your friends keep telling you about great episodes, yet you can never remember what they told you. Well, here's the answer. Good Pods. It's the social app dedicated to podcasts where your friends, podcast listeners, and favorite podcast hosts all come together to share on their feeds what they recommend and what they listen to. You can connect to others, bookmark episodes, start a conversation about the episode, connect to the hosts, and most importantly, listen to great podcasts right in the Good Pods app. Download Good Pods wherever you get your apps and start sharing with a community that loves to listen. Good Pods. It's where to connect and listen.